many names that I know from our previous webinars. So it is just wonderful to have you all here again. And it's a lovely time to be able to get together and focus on specific things within the program. So I'm just going to bring up the PowerPoint, and wow, we're still hearing from where you are. Very, very global collective today. So that's marvelous. So let me just share my screen, and Ollie, my tech man, will let me know if everything is okay. Is it showing? Yep, so that's wonderful. So today we are focusing in a particular area, which is blending and segmenting. And many of you are probably very familiar with the terminology. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into solutions and also what to look for and how to accommodate it in your class. But more than anything, it's a lovely welcome, and I just want to know, what are you reading right now? So in the chat, just pop in if you're reading a book. I'd love to know what you're reading. It may be for pleasure, it may be academic, it may be just something that you've picked up recently. So let's hear from you what you are reading, just so that we can have, oh, look, Harry Potter. Wow, the Dark Materials. Oh my goodness. Look at this, speech to point. I read a newspaper. Wow, the whole brain child. Now, this is amazing that you're sharing this with me. And the reason I have asked is very specific, because you are at a mastery level of reading. It's effortless and you enjoy every page, I should imagine. But how did you get to that? How did you get to the point of being able to read Obstacle is a Way or Setting Boundaries? Someone taught you about blending and segmenting. Oh, look, the housemaid. Wow. So some great tips there if you want to share these in the chat about good books. So you're reading right now, and therefore someone has helped you master letter sounds and also blending and segmenting. And this is where we want to help children get this foundational skill, life skill in place, so that as an adult, they have a rich environment where they are using these skills, not only for enjoying great books, but also an everyday use. So thank you for sharing that with me. So as we move on, let me just find my pointer. There we go. We are today going to look at several areas of reading and writing that connected. Well, actually, the next one. My PowerPoint is doing something very strange right at the moment. So what happens when Ollie's in the room? I'm going to blame him. I'm going to say it's got stuck because of him. But these little challenges are worth it. Very, very quickly, what is Jolly Phonics? As you know, it is a great synthetic phonics program and one that enables children to read and write. But more than anything, it is hugely adaptable. And we know this because our teachers are communicating with us all the time about how they use it with different age ranges, also with English as a second language, and the spectrum we have of special needs. So we're fully aware of how you're using the program to support your English in the classroom. But more than anything, within the program, if you are familiar with it, you will recognize that we have 5 core skills. Now, these are embedded in the program to a lesser or great degree in the resources that we use. And that's why, just like the Department of Education, we endorse complete fidelity into using these resources so you get the children to the point where we need to get them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that after. But I've highlighted here that we have blending for reading and segmenting for spelling. But actually the two are very connected, because if you're using one skill, you are often using the other skill. And we know from the interactions we have from schools and teachers that this can be a problematic area for children, that they can do one really well and they may not be able to do the other really well. So we're going to explore some of this in the webinar today. But first, let's remind ourselves that there are 42 sounds in the program, and apart from that, we have tricky words. So it isn't that easy for children sometimes to grasp all of these. And this is why we have programs that in the lesson plans that help you establish a good way of teaching, but also that we're building on those skills. Every time you move forward, it's like a learning spiral. Children get the opportunity to be able to revise what they did earlier on and also learn that new sound. Now, this is important for me to mention because While we're doing that, we're also bringing in blending and segmenting, and children are making that correspondence between what they hear and what they see. And that words have to be blended a few times before they are read, and also children need regular practice. Now, that's something I will talk about because often there is just not enough time in the classroom. And what else can you be doing to support blending and segmenting? We also have Jolly Classroom, which again has all the things you need, a slightly different format, very clear. And what we do say is that to have this essential approach to different learning styles, you may like to use both of these as a way to move forward. Certainly the pupils' books consolidate what the children are doing, and certainly Jolly Classroom enables a wide practice from a visual and auditory point of view, which appeals to a lot of young children today. So this is a snapshot of how step 1 looks. We'll look a bit further at the other steps as we move on. Now, this is the technical stuff. We do need to know the simple view of reading. Basically, as you can see within these boxes, there are key things there that make an obvious pathway to how reading comprehension works. When I asked you about your book, you are using all of these skills that are highlighted here. You've got phonological awareness. You're also decoding. There is some sight recognition. More than anything, you have vocabulary. But more than that, you are bringing your life experience forward into the context of what you're reading. This is important in some ways for children with comprehension with reading, but we are focusing on this webinar about blending and segmenting. And I think in the future, we'll focus on a reading webinar. But as you can see in that last column, we are looking at how all of these come together. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about this because we just don't have time, but it's always good to remember the processes we're going through and how these are embedded in the program to support children. Now, again, I'm going to reach out to you, my wonderful teachers and parents and educators, to ask you what is blending. So we have the chat box. So let's have a look at what you say blending is. I'm going to have a look now. So what is blending? Let's see if we've got people willing to put in the sounds together. Great. Look at this. Lovely. Joining letters, putting sounds together, combining sounds, putting them together. Brilliant. So this is great that I'm getting such positive feedback. Now, it wasn't a trick question, but it's also good to hear your voice in these webinars as well. So I wanted to hear what you had to say about blending. Blending is very essential. We know this. And when we think about blending, it is taking the sounds and letting them run together. When we talk about synthetic phonics, synthetic doesn't mean it's false. It means from synthesize, and synthesizing means running sounds together. So basically what children are doing are taking their knowledge of that letter sound and that letter shape, and they're putting them together. As you can see from this illustration, we have added things like sound dots. So not only are they aware of the sound in that word, but also they understand that we can have two letters making one sound. This is all assisting the visual cues to help with blending. And also they won't need that constantly, but at the beginning, using the dots and using that multi-sensual approach where they can use their arms and other ways of doing their blending and segmenting is highly important, especially with young children. And we'll have a look at that as we move on. But segmenting is breaking the word into its individual sounds. Some children have absolutely no problem in going from one skill to another skill. But equally, we have children who may find one area more challenging than the other. Usually, as Sue Lloyd says, you are able to identify this within the first few sound groups. If a child is able to identify a grapheme, a shape, and then its sound, but then it can't place that when it's in amongst other letters and other sounds. Again, these are areas that need to be addressed, and we'll talk about how assessment is your best tool to be able to do this. What you will notice in the slides is that I have put in some top tips on how you can address certain areas. There's a lot of information in some of the slides at the end of the webinar, and this is because I know that it's recorded and you can pause and you can look at these tips that I have given you. But what you will notice, like the child in this, is that he is using tactile, visible resources like our flashcards so that he can play, orientate, and use the words and make sense of what they're saying to them. So why does blending and segmenting matter? As you can see here, it is the core for phonemic awareness and essential for decoding, which is reading, and encoding, which is spelling. If we don't have these skills in place with the simple CVC words or the words that are within the first 3 groups of the program, we may find if we skip over these too quickly, and typically if you know the program, you will know that these are the short vowel sounds, that when we move on to group 4 and go on to group 7, where we do expand the child's knowledge, it will be a difficult task if we don't get it right at the beginning. So children could end up with a deficit of their knowledge when they move on to year 1 and year 2, going through things really quickly. It is a fast-paced program, but we also give advice that you can adapt it to suit the timing and the classes you have every week. We would love it that you consolidate and move on without the child being in an area of confusion about how to segment and blend. Children need time to hear and manipulate and combine all the sounds that they have in words. If they're not doing it at the early stages, or there are some difficulties where that blending is better than segmenting or segmenting is better than blending, it can have an effect on the long-term predictors of reading fluency. These early stages, and I'll mention about the decodable books later on, these early stages of practice that we have put in enables you, the tutor or teacher, to be able to organize revision, introduction, blending opportunities, segmenting opportunities, but then how these come together. You often do blending and segmenting in isolation, but it's also important that they come together so children are making sense of the 2 skills they're learning and the bigger area of reading that they're going to cover. I've got a lovely photograph here of the teacher's book, and as you will see with the teacher's book, that big red arrow is pointing down to blending and also sounding, and you will find that every page will give you ideas on how to extend, but also you will notice that at the beginning and the end there's activities. A lot of the activities that we have are using the 5 key skills, but you can extend out what you want to suit your child. We recognize that throughout the program, all of the lessons can be adapted to suit the rhythm of your class. So if you find that maybe 40% of your class are finding blending or segmenting difficult, you have the word books or the little the word bank book to be able to support that extra vocabulary for if you want to do it quickly on your whiteboard, if you want the children to use post-its to pop it on. But what we do know is that it needs practice. And the one good thing about the blending and segmenting skills that your children will be doing are they are transferable skills that can go to other languages if you are in an English as a second language environment. Also, that the visual cues that you present, keep them up. Don't just teach phonics in isolation. The most important thing about phonics is that you can be wrapping it around your day and getting children to be having quick fire activities so that they can do these things while they're sitting down, they're standing up, they're getting ready to move on. And again, assessment, very important, as I mentioned, so that children are not moving on without having the right skills in place. So with our teaching progression, what are we looking for? What we want at the early stage of introducing Jolly Phonics is that children are beginning to acquire these wonderful mastery skills that enable them to move on securely to the other groups. So it may look very easy for children to be blending CVC words or going on to bigger words. You'll find all of these in the teacher's book and the word bank. But then how are you organising enough time within your lesson planning to support your segmenting that will move on much later when we get to literacy, to onset and rhyme and full phoneme segmenting? It is important to do dictation. I speak to many teachers who often say, I just don't fit that into my lesson. Now, think about this if you have time to do the dictation. The dictation offers the child to use so many different skills that include blending and segmenting, but also handwriting, letter formation, or letter and sound correlation. But more than anything, it's grammar. They're using structures that will help them when they move on to Jolly Literacy. But what they write, they have to read. And what they read is, again, about pronunciation, which they'll find in the decodable books with the little font, the change of the font within the words. So as you can see, one skill moves on to another skill, moves on to another skill. And I've mentioned a few here, but certainly identifying spelling patterns and how children find that key sound that they're learning in the word and also begin to read it. We are a big fan of multi-sensory learning. So again, I'm going to reach out to you, my lovely teachers and educators, to pop in the chat exactly what is your favorite multi-sensory learning activity, because we see this as an opportunity for us to share activities as well. So pop in the chat your favorite multi-sensory activity and let's share that. So we've got movable letters, yes. And we also have sound tracing, brilliant, and songs, kinesthetic, auditory, Play-Doh, letter formation, charades, magnetic ball, SALT, yes, speech and language therapy, tracing Play-Doh. Okay, so while you're using all of these, are you blending and segmenting or just doing phonemes? So clapping to count how many sounds, shaping for blending, show and tell. So this is great that we have this really a big mixture of activities. Funky fingers, I like that. And also flashcards, yeah. Sound hopskip. All of these things are indicating to me that as teachers, you're having a lot of fun doing your blending and segmenting, but also you're recognizing that children learn in very different ways. So being able to offer all of these things, you can begin to build up their skills so that when they are reading for fluency and comprehension, they don't have to struggle to identify what is that letter and what is that sound. They are so secure with their letter sounds that should be effortless with the blending and the segmenting. In the question there, we had someone ask, do I do blending or segmenting first? Well, first we do the blending and then we do the segmenting. And if you look at the Jolly Classroom app, you will find that there are excellent lesson plans in there to support you with that and how you can move forward. And also you'll see here that we have the magnetic letters and the arm blending. The children love this arm blending because of the tapping, and the tapping does help them remember how many sounds, and also using the letter sound strips, which again are a great way. And I love this picture because it shows a collaborative approach to how the children are doing their dictation. It's great. Okay, they might copy each other or they might be working it out, but the good thing is that they're using their skills to do so in a very proactive way. And as you can see from Jolly Classroom, if we move on to step 2, if you are not familiar with the program, what you will recognize is that built into this mirrors what is in Pupils Book 2. So we are building in blending and segmenting in the activities. And you can see that all the other areas of the 5 key skills effortlessly go into your daily plans. And also, as we are moving along, you will see that there's the alternatives and diagraphs. And when we get to step 3, we have weekly practice and daily practice, which again involves blending, segmenting, and looking at tricky words. And of course, we're not going to cover a lot of tricky words today. But one thing worth mentioning is that when children are secure with the 42 sounds, they can find the tricky bit and they can also work out the bits they know. So again, this is a great opportunity for you to provide diversity of resources to support. Now, I've just popped in, I haven't put a lot of pupil book pages in, but what I wanted to show you here was how children are using those skills of blending and segmenting as they move along. And besides the blending and segmenting, if you look at the first page for words and sentences that are in different colors, what do you notice? I'm going to reach out to you again to put in the chat box. Is it all about one word? What else are they doing while they're using that great skill of blending, segmenting? Let's have a look at the chat box. So besides sentences, tricky words, yeah, sentence structure, okay. Using the pictures, yes. Visual cues, grammar, sentence structure again, yes. So as you can see, we are focusing on quite a few skills here, but predominantly children are using stories, yeah, sentence frames. They are using all of their knowledge to be able to blend and segment and make that cluster of little sounds into a word. What an achievement. What a great skill. And the more practice we can put in, how easily and effortlessly they move on to book 3, where we have the last story. And whoa, that's a lot of text there. And they are able to read that and answer the questions. And of course, as a teacher, you're constantly modeling and you're constantly helping. Somebody mentioned about how do we do the alternatives. Well, first of all, we've got to make sure that we have the 42 sounds done correctly, because if we haven't got those in properly, where children understand that they've got that sound and the spelling options, they will not be able to move on securely to the alternatives. And I did mention letter patterns and things that you can use. And in the last webinar, you will notice, have a look at it on our YouTube channel, where I am specifically talking about how children look for patterns within their reading and also how they are learning that new sound as they move on to the alternatives. So first we bring them back. You will notice that in the pupils books and Jolly Classroom, we bring them back to that original sound A with the original spelling choices before we move on. And there's all these examples to revise, and then we move on to the alternatives. Again, it takes time because children have to not only customize their ear, it's the same sound, but it's a different spelling, and lots of opportunities to see these in words. So reading and spelling is, we have this linked, is that, when children can learn to segment and break down a word, that means for reading, it means it's a vice versa, and it can work for spelling. And we'll be looking at writing in the next webinar. But both of these need to be integrated to have the maximum impact for reading. When you are reading your favorite book, like I said earlier, then you might come across a word that you don't know. What do? You're breaking it down into chunks because you already know what those sounds are. You might be blending and segmenting before you move on to the next word. So these are important things that we are using every single day, and not only for reading, but for writing. So there are challenges with blending and segmenting, and I'm going to open up the chat box and ask you if some of you have any challenges. Let's see if we've seen there's a commonality with challenges with blending and segmenting. Because what you might notice is some of you may have very, very similar issues. And therefore, you may recognize that it's not your teaching, but just generally the schwa, that generally it's children are approaching letters and sounds differently because we have so many different ways of introducing these when they're listening to the iPad, their mother tongue, the TV. So we have the schwa blending, identify consonants and vowels, identify consonant and vowels, segmenting is a problem. A new letter every day, okay, okay. Having confidence, children are scared to make mistakes. To children with real big, asking children to read words that they haven't got the scope for. All different levels of reading, consonant blends. So there's a lot there, and I'm going to pick one or two things to mention in that If you have children who can't identify the vowels and the consonants, you need to go back to the basics and get them to go through the vowels. You have your vowel hand, you know, in Jolly Phonics, especially in Jolly Classroom, we have a wonderful interactive vowel hand with the a, e, o, a. They need to be able to do these well before they move on to the a, e, I, o, u. And mentioning about children having different reading levels, this is a common thing in many classes, but the one thing we've got to be mindful of is that for you to assess the children, more so using decodable readers, are they decoding the letter sounds that you have taught and the tricky words? So let's have a look at some of the common issues that we have with children and blending and segmenting. So let's have a listen.
What will be
Can you hear that, Ollie?
in the set that wait and speak?
And what sound did that make?
Clap.
Wow. Can you see the digraph in these?
Yeah.
We've got the digraph here. Henry.
Good.
Well done. Let's see what else do we have.
She said the chick picking up the stick
At.
at a stick.
Well done. Let's have
We said the word on back jumping off a hat.
fantastic. Well done.
Wolf said the top stuck in a log. Wood said the kangaroo, I can spring too.
Well done, Miss Jennifer.
Out said the snow, out in the ale.
Look, there's two digraph here.
Ch-
Yeah, and this one?
Good reading, well done everyone, you've done really good. Do you remember? Shall we have a look? Yeah, we could always go back and have
I'm going to stop here and I'm going to ask you to pay attention to the little lad with the yellow book.
a look to see who jumped off the hat. Who could it be? Do you think it was the goose?
Wasn't that a great video? Now in the chat, tell me, what did you hear that teaching assistant do to help them with their reading? What were you hearing the children do? Let's have a look at the chat. What was the teaching assistant helping the teachers to do? The sound wasn't good. Well, lots of encouragement. Okay, digraphs, yeah. Pointing, yeah. The video froze for me. Oh, I do apologize. It will be better on the YouTube channel. She was helping them recognize she was guiding, scaffolding, encouraging. Now I'm going to ask you, what did you think about the little chap who was at the end of the video? What did you pick up about him? What did you hear? What did you see? Didn't see the end. Okay. But we're going to visit that little chap again. But what I wanted you to see in this wonderful video is that we are watching how a teaching assistant is using her skills to be able to encourage the child to blend and segment the decodable reader. She was also pointing out, now finger tracking. I was there when they were doing that, so she was helping the child recognize where she should be. Some children she does that to, other children she doesn't. But she was also getting them to look at the digraphs and also the tricky words. Now, not many of you may have the opportunity to be able to do it that way, but what you can do is model when you have your class, or if you're using any of the resources, just how we can look for these cues, these signals in the words, so that children are remembering what they have learned from the 42 sounds. Also, what you did here was kind of a labored, slow reading. That is how it is at the beginning, as they are reading each word. As you develop your skills, as you are reading those fabulous books that you mentioned earlier on, what you're doing is your brain is doing an amazing task in that it is decoding, it is blending, segmenting, it's also going forward and anticipating how that will end. Will it be a question mark? Will it be an exclamation mark? You're using so many skills because you've had a lot of practice. And what it does come down to is offering the children the ability to be able to practice everything that they have learned. So here we have some challenges, which some of you may be very familiar with. You know, they can say the sounds, but they can't blend. They can read, but not spell. They confuse similar sounds, and they struggle with digraphs. So what I have done is put a few suggestions on what we can do in your class for quick activities to get children up and board and at the level you want. I know that you can't stop your class and have a special activity for every child, but some of the activities that you have here will benefit even the children who are really good with blending and segmenting. Some of these activities here don't require anything else but your voice and post-its and just flashcards and some of the resources that we have within our program. But what you can see here is that sound guessing and chunking games. Well, chunking, I'm talking about here using digraphs, and also dictation with arm tapping, using the arm to identify and segment. Sound sorting and auditory discrimination games. As somebody mentioned about the vowel sounds, or even confusion from, if you're using two languages, how one symbol can be very similar sounding to a symbol we have in British English or American English. And also visual. How are you visually representing these within your class? Okay, so now we have that little boy. Have a look.
Snake hiding.
The snake was hiding. Where was he hiding? In what is this? What do you think that's called?
Pot.
A pot. Do you think it's got honey inside it? Oh, I think it might have a chocolate inside it. Just a snake. Okay, just a snake. Well done, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to pause that one. Now, before I move on to this other little girl, in the chat box, what did you notice about this little boy? What was his interaction with the reading material? Let's have a look at the chat. I'm asking you to be very, very observant today. What did you notice? A picture? Oh, video froze again. It wasn't clear, Maya, I'm sorry. He recognized pot, visual with the pictures. He was focusing on the picture only, yes. You've picked up some really good points because this little boy did find it difficult to do blending and segmenting. But what the teaching assistant was doing was trying to build up his confidence in using the book, how he was using it in his hands, and also drawing him into the story. And her next step after that was to attempt to get him to read several sentences. And he was struggling with blending and segmenting. But because that has been flagged up, extra attention had been given to the whole class delivery on blending and segmenting activities so that he is not in isolation. The one thing we found that if children get frightened or embarrassed or feel insecure within the class environment about doing these skills or made to feel inadequate, they will never improve. But what we can do is get it as a whole class approach where we're doing healthy revision, introduction, helping that child who may be in that 10% of struggling, and also ways that we can engage him with reading. Now here we have a lovely little girl who has English as a second language, and she's only been speaking English for about 8 months. And listen to her with her wonderful reading, I hope.
What's this?
This is a dog fox.
Back down here.
The dog fox.
Girl.
Now, exactly, she was using her blending and segmenting skills to read that word, but she was being prompted by the teacher. So activities like this, where you're just using maybe 2 pages of the book, the decodable books are measured to where the child is with their learning, but also they're using their skills. These books are different to standard English books because they are presenting children with the sounds they have already done, but also the variation of words is helping them with their vocabulary, which is very important. I've mentioned quite a lot about assessment and progressing with tracking through this part of the webinar. And the only way we can be secure that children may have a problem with one side or the other altogether is that you are making some assessment or evaluation as the children are moving forward. What you will see that within the program, we have several tools that you could use, but certainly within Jolly Classroom, we have broken down the assessments so they are fitting after 3 groups, and then from the 4th group down to the 7th group. We also have the paper-based ones as well. But what we have found since we've brought out this facility for you is that children are at less risk of moving forward too quickly with having gaps. And as you can see there, I've practiced to stop gaps further along. This is one thing that we know happens, that children are appearing or looking like they are blending and segmenting until they are presented with reading material. What the assessments do is give children to practice using short CVC words or larger words, but then the difference is when we put that word in the context of a sentence, because sometimes it can be a different context that is affecting the blending and segmenting securely. So please make sure you're doing regular assessment. We don't want any child to fall behind and more so suffer because we didn't identify where we could have filled those gaps. So sometimes it's good to have reading checks and sound checks, but reading logs, know what your children are reading. Also targeting weak areas through small group intervention like you saw, but I do understand many of you are working with very big classes. So it's how you negotiate that within your teaching dynamic. And celebrate progress to build confidence is a big thing. As we saw with that little boy who is clearly struggling, the support he is getting in the class means that he is moving forward securely, but also, have you noticed, he is with his group of friends who are really achieving. He needs to feel the confidence to move on. So what we know is that having the success with blending and segmenting means that children are moving on with fluency and accuracy, and comprehension may be something that you have to work with if you're working with English as a second language. I know that when I had Spanish children, they could read perfectly, but their comprehension wasn't there. We did get there with comprehension, with building in lots of vocabulary activities and also further reading like stories. But what my point was, getting them to blend and segment those sounds that they had heard. Also, that they are able to recognize a tricky word. Once children can do this effortlessly, it reduces that cognitive load, which causes stress for children as they move on to more advanced literacy materials. And if we have that in place, what it does do is make children look beyond decodable readers and want to go into having stories, small chapter books, and enjoy all the curiosity with print that's around with them. And also it prevents the phonics ceiling by ensuring that children don't just reach one point. And that could be that they only know the 42 sounds and they can't go any further. What we do know is that children's literacy skills are declining because we are not providing that scope and sequence of this rich environment of the skills they can pick up and also practice. It's an interesting dynamic at the moment. And as you can see here, I've put here the explanation about phonics ceiling. And again, you can pause this when you've got the webinar and have a look at it. But also what we know that once children have got those skills in place and they don't have that pressure of having to stop at every single word to decode it and use their blending and segmenting skills, it ensures independent reading and writing. Now, remember, we're talking about a reverse skill. If you can read it, you can probably write it. When you write it, you are reading it. When you write an email on your laptop, you read it to check that it's okay. So these are reversible skills that are very important. Now, the decodable readers, I feel it's really important to mention because these are critical really for reading success. Our authors, Sarah Wernham and Sue Lloyd, have designed these books that they have quite a big interest level in that we have decodables and also fiction. But the one thing is that children have a place to practice. and they need to practice. We have lots of visual cues to support that, and they are aligned to the science of reading. But they, as it says here, they align with a child's current phonics knowledge, and that is important. And I'll mention that because sometimes you'll pick up the book and you'll think this is way too easy, but they are specifically aligned to the sound groups that children have done, so they are developing that fluency that comes with good blending and segmenting. They cannot blend and segment successfully a sound they haven't learned yet. So please be mindful about that. So using the decodables offers confidence and success. Children are able to successfully use that knowledge to read. Now, what a win that is, to be able to read a sentence. And although, like with many of us, when you're starting off, it takes time to understand everything completely, they're building up that skill. And also, it gives an encouragement to read independently, which will boost their confidence and keep that motivation going early. The one thing also is, don't restrict this to the classroom. If you are sending books home for reading with parents, help parents understand why they are at that level and everything that is involved. Because if you don't know about phonics, you often think the books look super easy, but in fact, there's a lot of skill involved. Also, it prevents guessing, because with the control texts, which are predictable, children are encouraged to decode those words, but they're not guessing based on pictures or context. So this really does strengthen their skills and leads to better word recognition over time. And we have a great range of books that can be used. Certainly the orange readers are popular, but we also have the pink ones that we'll look at in a minute. And it supports literacy instruction. And as you can see here, I've got quite a lot of text supporting this, but it does serve as a bridge, because remember, most of our children are using decodables only in their literacy hour. Most of their other resources for learning may be in standard English, but what we are offering by giving them the decodables to practice their blending and segmenting is a successful pathway to use the other resources that they have within their curriculum on their other lessons. Also, for you, you are able to track their progress. If they are using a decodable that fits with the level that they're at with the letter sounds that they know, this is a great way for you to know if blending and segmenting is successful and they are reading properly. I mentioned the pink readers, and these are our newest ones, and they're absolutely adorable, and they fit just before the orange readers. And I have to say, my favorite one is the Monster Fun, which is right down there at the bottom. But what you'll notice, this is only some of them. We have fiction and non-fiction, but the idea is the children have this new set, which is a bit in between what they have with the little word books and also the orange readers, and it slots in there to give some of the children who have got the skills to move on with their blending and segmenting. So we hope you enjoy these ones. And one of the things we've got to remember is that if children cannot blend and cannot put the sounds together, it is going to significantly impact on their reading development. So again, I'm going right back to the beginning of the webinar where I was talking about lots of practice and lots of multisensory activities right at the beginning when we're doing those single sounds, those blending and segmenting. But if we don't get that right, if you don't get that into the organization of your lessons, again, they're all in the teacher's book. It's all there for you at a glance. You can see the impact here. What I have designed this slide deck for is for you to pause and be able to read these slides when you have a bit more time. And you can also get some ideas at the end of the webinar, the slides I have there on what to do. But we are conscious that children will have difficulty decoding words, and also that this does play heavy with the cognitive ability, and then it does move on to poor reading fluency. And fluency is quite high up there in a lot of checks within countries with reading and children's ability with their literacy skills. We also find that if children aren't reading, their vocabulary is limited. So again, it's that question of giving them the opportunity to be able to blend and segment, and also it moves on to weak spelling skills. What we do have are great flashcards with the dots to get children started. You can then use your dictation sentences up on the board, or even put them on a sentence strip. So children are reading. There's lots of opportunities for you to take what is in the program and extend that to simple reading activities. As we saw with those pages from the book, they are reading. You could extend that. You could put that together. You could have them as reading strips in your classroom, but give children the opportunity to blend and segment. Most of the challenges that we have with teachers is because there isn't enough time, and we understand that within your teaching. But then think about how you can have consolidation activities to give children the opportunity to do this. So you have here at the end of this webinar, I'm very conscious of the time, some activities that you can use, and also ways that you can refine these down to work with your teaching environment. More than anything, I am aware that you may have 5 children, you may have 25 children, is what works for you. And also, if you have children who are struggling, how are you warming up your class? This could be a great opportunity to have blending and segmenting. Blending, that you're hearing the children synthesize or put those sounds together. But ask the question, if you have a segmenting activity, what sounds are they hearing? Are they confusing the I with the A? Are they confusing the O with the I? Pick up this, listen to them, get them, model, use the evaluation and also the assessment. In Jolly Classroom, you even have the sounds. So if you feel that you're not confident with your English, or you're not happy with your pronunciation of certain things, you have the aid of Jolly Classroom to be able to produce the sound for you. It's an amazing way that you can get children blending and segmenting and hearing the correct pronunciation. And more than that, when they move on to the decodables, there are the light coloured fonts in the words where the children can see the letter sound, but they know it's not produced. So you have all these wonderful activities, and also, asking children, even if it isn't the phonics class or the literacy class, saying to them, come on now, we've got a word like cloud, it's my geography class, or we're doing topic, what can you hear? Can you hear the owl sound? Can we blend and segment that? Put some words up. Remember, this skill is not just for the phonics class, it's for all other areas of learning, but also we need to do it regularly, practice daily, small chunks, bigger chunks, and reading. Wow, I've been telling you a lot of what to do today. So here is your opportunity to win pink readers. And look at this, I have a set here. And you might have heard when we were looking at the pink readers, I said, here we go. The question is, what pink reader do I like? Now, let's see if you remember, if you were paying attention. Yes. Wow, you're paying attention. This is wonderful. No, I wasn't going to give you the one that I showed you. No. So I think Ollie has got those first few people who got it. Well done. I tell you what, that was absolutely brilliant. Okay, so I think it's the first 5 people will be getting a little bundle of pink readers, and you've been brilliant at doing that. Thank you. You're paying attention. I'm so glad that you've been paying attention. So I'm going to come out of this so that we have the opportunity to at least have a few minutes for questions. So let me just come out of this and let's see if we can get into some questions. All right, so let's see, monster fun. So let's have a look at questions.
You see the questions in.
All right, I'm going to see the questions. There we go. Wow. So thank you. I really love it when I get the opportunity to have some questions. So they've asked me to teach blending to, this is a good one, for 2.5, 2.5-year-old. Yeah, 2.5-year-old would be ambitious to do blending and segmenting, mainly because children do not have the cognitive skill in place. If you do have some children who can do it, that is great. But generally, children of that age need to be able to firstly understand environmental sounds and then move on to understanding that a squiggle has a sound. So what you might be doing, as I mentioned, is cognitive overload. You don't want to overload the children. It's too much. But having said that, you can model blending and segmenting, but it doesn't mean your children are forced to do it. You could say, can you sit down? Can you find the table? What sound is the table? You could model it, but it really is difficult to do that with such young children. So teaching fluency, what strategy? Reading. The more they read, the better they become, and fluency is about speed. Sometimes we look at fluency and it's not about comprehension, and there's a lot of testing going out there on the speed that children can read. So if that is one of the criteria you're working with, then reading. If you don't have the wealth of reading material, please use the dictation sentences, or if you use the little word book or the word bank, you have all the words you need that the children will have done to make your own sentences. He that reads well but cannot write the words spelling. So clearly he needs more opportunities in being able to look at these words and be able to either use manipulatives. It may be a case that he needs to use magnetic letters or flashcards to work out the sounds so that they can come together to be the spelling. So sometimes we do get children who read very well, but they haven't had enough practice of using single sounds to make words and able to break them down so that they can make that whole word. Are the Pink series available in South Africa?
Yes, they will be very, very shortly.
Yeah.
They're on their way down to South Africa right now. So via jollylearning.co.za, you'll be able to find them on there very soon.
Okay. And another thing here is, should you introduce certain letters as being vowels and consonants to children? Well, you can. I mean, we say CVC, which is consonant, vowel, consonant, but you can say to children, these are vowels. We talk about the short sound vowels and consonants. So what I have found is children are quite comfortable with language like this. And if you use it as instructional language, that's absolutely fine. Any extra guidance when online classes are taken apart from Jolly Classroom? Well, what I would say that if you are doing online classes and you are doing the lessons with Jolly Classroom, you can use, if you're using Zoom, there's a whiteboard feature on Zoom, or even holding up a whiteboard where you can do blending and segmenting with words. Again, there's words in the teacher's book or sentences. You can get words and practice that way, or you can give children reading, little segments of reading to do that you can send to your individual children. But again, you've got to make sure that they're the sounds that the children have done. How many sounds can a 4-year-old take per lesson? One per lesson. We're not asking you to do more than that. It is too much for children to do more than one lesson of sound, because you've got to remember that one sound per lesson also involves in revising what they have previously done while you're introducing this new sound. Also, schwa. How can children learn this without confusion? That you put the infrastructure in place. That first of all, they know the sounds, they know the graphemes that represent this, but then they understand. So if I said the word mirror, children are going to hear the at the end of that. But if I say mirror, or mirror, I'm modeling it. I'm overpronouncing, but I'm also modeling the correct way before I would go into using how the schwa sound. Also, let's see, we sometimes have specific rules to teach alternative sounds, for example, E and E. How can we help students do these? When we get to the alternatives, What I would say is if you follow the lesson plans, you will not really have a problem because they are designed that the children has the core digraph or the sound practiced and known and see in words. Then when we move on to the alternative, they go back to that original one, like in the A sound. Before we move on to the alternatives, we look at words that have the A sound, like train, snail, and then we move on to the first alternative and the second alternative. Children need lots of practice, and this is a great way for looking at patterns. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have the A sound, normally A has letters around it. Sometimes the A, as in AY in day, is at the end of a word. Not always, but these are patterns that you can help introduce. Also, reading material. They need to read it to make it stick. So you have that as well. You can't have half a program working. We need to have the complete approach to have success. And we've got one more. We struggle with kids who speak 5 languages or more. Wow, we're limited hours at home. How do we motivate parents to help them with the reading progress at home? Explain to them what you're doing. Get them in for a workshop. Send home a newsletter. Help them understand that the books that they are reading are specific for supporting English language acquisition and literacy. Most parents want to know what their children are doing. So if you're able to do even a little explainer video, a letter sent home, or something that the parents can understand the motivation behind children reading and using these skills, it can help. English is an important language in global affairs today. So the more we can get children upskilled, the better. And I think I've got time for one more. Classes are held wonderful. Unfortunately, we cannot blend. They cannot blend the sounds. Okay. If your children are not blending the sounds, stop. Go back and have a look at your lesson plans and think about what can I do to get them blending. We really need to, if you have this and you've identified it, that is absolutely great. It means that you are observing the children in your class. But more than anything, if you see that it's a problem with the majority of your children, stop. Go back to the basics. Simple CVC words. Think about where are they missing certain information? It could be the vowel sounds. It could be once you get past 4 or 5 letters that are in a word. And also it may be a context. So really go back, but I think it's brilliant that you have identified that and you're being proactive. Well, we've come to the end of another lovely webinar with you. And there's always so much to share. We just don't have enough time. But more than anything, I hope that this has helped for your classroom dynamic, and also that we can go on to our next webinar, which will be about for writing, how we can support blending and segmenting in writing. I'm going to have lots of activities for you to get started, but more than anything, it will give you some ideas that you can use to support the lesson plans and get your children in the right place for the next stage, which is a Jolly Literacy. So thank you, everybody. Thank you very, 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 very much for joining.